This is The Competitive Edge with Chris Walker. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge so you too can reach your full potential. Do you want more unique ideas and tactics like the ones we're about to share in this episode? Then you're going to want to do two things. The first is to subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes so that you don't miss out on new ideas from future conversations. After this, you're going to want to go check out my main site, lifelonglearner.com. When you enter in your email address to join the Lifelong Learner community, you'll get access to my most advanced strategies to stack the deck in your favor. Again, that's life-longlearner.com. What's up, Competitive Edge listeners? Thanks again for tuning in today to this episode. Now, some of you might already know this from reading my blog, Lifelong Learner, but over the past year, I've been on a mission to naturally increase my testosterone. Now, I know the T word might freak some people out, but truthfully, this hormone is responsible for so many critical factors to a high quality life for men and women, like fitness levels, energy, emotions, libido, and even sleep. Assuming we could improve all those things, what person wouldn't want to increase their testosterone, especially in men? After a year of experimentation, I was able to naturally double my testosterone, and this was only due to people who really knew the subject, like today's guest, Chris Walker. Chris is a fellow podcaster with his show Road to Ripped, as well as the blogging show, and he's the founder of Testosterone.io, which is the best resource I've encountered on naturally increasing your T levels. Chris created this program after going from a testosterone level of less than 100 due to a tumor in his brain to over 1,100, all by changing his diet, fitness, and habits and applying the lessons he learned studying neuroscience at Duke. Fellas, if you don't know about what normal testosterone levels are, 1,100 is almost off the charts for dudes and something that's definitely desirable, but we'll talk about that more in the show. Today, this is really just the episode on testosterone, and we're going to be sharing everything you need to know about this essential hormone, including how to increase it. If you're a dude and want your life to be more awesome, you should definitely tune in. And ladies, T is an important hormone for you, but you don't want to skyrocket it like guys, or some weird things might happen. Anyways, anyone interested in personal optimization, in my opinion, should check out today's show because it really opens your eyes to epigenetics and why we often need to focus on addressing the root source of the ability to change our bodies instead of looking at things like workout or diet. I mean, truthfully, something that affects all of that is our hormones. And today we're going to talk about and show a real case study of how you can actually change these things to make it way easier to get the bodies, the minds, and the feelings that you want, no matter what workout you decide to do. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Chris Walker. He's an awesome guy and has an incredible story. Chris, what's up, man?
What's up?
Nothing. I'm just excited today to talk a little bit about testosterone. And before we do, because I know there's some female listeners out there who probably hear this word and are fleeing because they think of angry dudes outside of bars with veins in their forehead. This is actually an important hormone for both men and women, correct?
Correct. It is. Yeah, women need a healthy level of testosterone to have their endocrine system functioning properly. Though that is their healthy level of female testosterone is it's like 8 to 10 times lower than men. So, but I still think a lot of the recommendations for balancing the male endocrine system actually still apply to females, and it's a great way to go about balancing anybody's endocrine system.
And let's just real quick talk about, and maybe I know that it's very different for men and women, but maybe for the fellas, why is having proper hormonal balance and the right testosterone levels important for our functional health?
Basically, in general, or really with anybody, Having your endocrine system in tune is going to address most issues that people have. I operate on a philosophy in my life in general, but especially with health, that if you're having problems, you need to find out the root of the problem and solve that, address that, instead of addressing whatever symptom is happening. So it for the human body, the endocrine system is basically the root of most things. So when you balance your endocrine system, you're going to get rid of issues like sleeping issues, libido issues, sexual performance issues, depression, anxiety, and fat loss issues, muscle gain. The body, when the endocrine system is balanced, the body tends to essentially turn into the ideal version of you in every respect. Like, you feel great psychologically and physically.
So basically, there's all these people out there that are working out, that are trying to take supplements and trying to get that beach body they want, or have more energy, or whatever it is. But in reality, the root of the problem might be an imbalance in their hormones.
Yeah. That's usually what it is.
Interesting. Now, I know there's a lot of supplements out there that help with this stuff, but you actually have a very fascinating story about fixing your hormones. And really, it seems like kind of how you launched into this whole developing expertise around the endocrine system and your hormones. Can you maybe take us back and tell us a little bit about your journey in naturally increasing your testosterone?
Sure. Yeah. I'll start. Let's see. So I when I went to college, so I was like 17. I guess my senior year in high school, I started having some issues. I just felt way different than usual. Before that, I've been just the routine teenager, always feeling good, healthy, like running around, doing whatever I want, eating whatever I want. And at my senior year in high school, things started going downhill. I started having a lot of depression problems. And then I went to college, and then stuff got really bad. And I had to take, essentially stuff got so bad that I really had no idea what was going on. But I really just kind of couldn't deal with college at my second year. So I took my second year off of college and just went home to try and address my health, because something was off with my health and I couldn't really figure it out. But I'd lost a lot of weight. I was really skinny. I was like 6'2" at the time and 155 pounds, like very skinny. Very depressed, had a lot of anxiety, had problems really with just dealing with everyday life. But it was weird because it came out of nowhere. It kind of just like had come on for no reason. And so I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I took that year off of school. And so when I was home at my parents' house for that year, I actually ended up going into the doctor's office just on a routine checkup about somewhere like 6 to 8 months after I had already been home for that entire time. And so but that routine checkup turned into something that ended up being, I guess, pretty fateful. The doctor on the lab results basically he saw like a bunch of irregular blood markers. So he was like, oh gosh, I got to send you to go see a specialist. So I went to see a hematologist oncologist, and he did like a full hormonal panel. And he's like, okay, I think you have a brain tumor. And I was like, oh shit,
that's a bad word.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, well, to me, I was relieved actually, to find out that there was a root cause, that because a lot of times when people have these kind of issues, like eating issues, weight gain, weight loss, that's kind of unexplained, and depression, anxiety issues, they just kind of turn into thinking that that's the way they are, like who they are as a person, and they're like kind of crazy, because a lot of people can't put their finger on exactly what's causing stuff like that, because they don't go and get it checked out. And a lot of doctors can't find things, roots to that cause. But I was lucky, I think, that I had a tumor that could be found, not only seen on blood panels, but also just because of like the action that it caused. But they also found it on an MRI. So basically they were just like, okay, yeah, you got a brain tumor. So instead of and well, my testosterone was extremely low. That was the reason that I went into the doctor for that checkup in the first place. Because I was like, oh yeah, I haven't felt like a 20-year-old male in years. Like, aren't I supposed to be, super horny right now all the time? But I hadn't, really had any sex drive for years. And so that was why I went in, and that, that was it was a relief to find out that it was a tumor causing it, because now I could figure out how to get rid of that problem. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear this. Someone's like dumping the trash outside.
It's okay. Trash people happen.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So, okay. So I remember reading, actually, it was like your testosterone level was like 11 or something. Like,
Yeah,
something
it was 11. It was
insane.
Zero. Yeah.
And
might as well have been zero.
And like the normal scale for dudes basically ranges anywhere from like the high 200s to like over 1,000. So the number 11 is like very, very small for those people that are less familiar with this hormone. But okay, so then you get diagnosed with the tumor. What happens next?
Okay, so from there, they gave me the choice. They said, you can either take, a hormone replacement and, some meds, and just take that and deal with it, and we'll monitor it and see if it grows. We'll have to do something, or the other choice is to operate and get it taken out. So I was like, no, I'm not going to operate on it, because, brain surgery is not exactly a small risk scenario. So I was just like, let's monitor it. So they gave me some testosterone gel, like antidepressants, all these meds. Basically, I turned into like a zombie for a little while. Not too long though, because basically I was like hell bent on this point, because I had been studying on health. This whole ordeal really got me interested in like natural health, using natural alternatives to health. So I became convinced. I was like, I need to figure this out. I was in school for neuroscience, so I was like, I'm well equipped to figure this out on my own. So I said, okay, I'm gonna like focus what I research on trying to address this issue, and doing it naturally. So I basically just focused on like the small things that I could do, to like steps I could take to well, first off, I was just like, screw the meds. I just threw them all away, and I stopped taking everything.
And that's because you were feeling like a zombie?
Yeah, I felt like a zombie, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Like, anyone who's ever taken an antidepressant, you turn into like I don't know, it's not mellow, but it just kind of like zones you out of everything. So I was definitely not doing that. Plus they have some, there's a lot of health risks to doing that sort of stuff, like altering your brain chemistry over the long term. Some people take those things for years and years. But it's kind of a pity that the doctors market that, or they tell you that like that's the way that you get better. But so I ditched all the meds, ditched the T gel. I was like, this is not sustainable. My reasoning was basically, it's like, if I need to figure out how to do this to be sustainable, so that for my entire life I can have high testosterone, I can have great mental well-being, and and have the body that I want and look great. And so I was hell-bent on doing it naturally. So, my doctors were kind of pissed. They were really pissed. They were like, this is the worst thing you could be doing. But I was like, no, I can figure this out.
You mean you don't want to rub gel on your chest anymore for the rest of your life? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's not cheap gel either. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. There's not much logic going on in that whole, the like traditional medicine right now. But I don't necessarily, I'm not trying to tell people to like go throw their meds away. I was just confident that I could figure out how to like fix this rather quickly.
It's an interesting, I want to just stop you for a second. Something interesting that I learned just about traditional medicine as I've kind of dove deeper into epigenetics is that something like less than 10% of doctors study nutrition. And I think like at less than 10 med schools, nutrition is even offered as a course. And just blew my mind, man. And I don't mean to discredit doctors. I love doctors. They've helped me many times, but there's just such a connection between our bodies, what we eat and how it reacts. And the fact that there is not more integration there is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think a turning point for me was learning, like as I learned about the nervous system, learning that that our gut contains, it's basically, it's called our second brain. Contains something like 100 million neurons. It's basically its own neural network, your gut, and it communicates directly with your brain. So learning that, I was like, damn, that means that the food that I'm eating, it really does have a direct impact on my brain health. Um, and that's like an epiphany for a lot of people, or should be, because a lot of we just spend all this time like shoveling garbage in our face, and it can really negatively affect your brain, and your brain controls everything, including your endocrine system. So yeah, it's kind of a pity that they don't study nutrition, but at the same time, the nutrition that they would be studying, if you look at a lot of like traditional highly regulated nutrition advice, it's regulated by the government. It's not necessarily like great advice. So at the same time, like whatever doctors study nutrition, you don't even know if like it's actually good advice in the first place. But that's a little side topic, I guess.
Anyway, so what were like the first steps that you realized you had low T? You started doing research like, wow, I want to cure this naturally. Screw the gels. What are the first steps that you took? And like,
Uh,
how can guys listening like think about optimizing this hormone?
yep. So the first thing that the first step I took was actually a psychological one. So I think it's really important for people, and it was really important for me because I was always in a hurry. I was like, I need to address this issue like right now, 6 weeks, or I need to get ripped in 8 weeks, like all these testimonials tell you. Um, so I think the biggest issue was a psychological one, the first step, because without this first step, it can be almost impossible for anybody to make any real progress. But the first step is basically just have a long-term mindset. So I shifted myself into that, and it wasn't an instant thing. It took a while. But by doing that, I was like, okay, I can take small steps. So the first step that I ended up taking was just switching over to a balanced intermittent fasting. I don't even want to say regimen, but it was like, I'm just gonna skip breakfast because I didn't even like eating breakfast. So I just felt at that point I just felt overfed. I don't know if that it's like kind of a self-aware thing, but if you just feel overfed, you're just like, I feel like I'm dependent on food to like get some kind of a good feeling. I feel gross, so I was
Totally,
like,
dude. And just real quick, can you just outline the concept of intermittent fasting to people who might not be familiar with it?
Sure, yeah. So intermittent fasting is basically having a period of time every day where you're fasting, and it's not like you go and fast for days on end. It's more just a daily thing where maybe it's like 16 hours or 18 hours, 14 hours every day where you're not consuming calories. You're really just giving your body a chance to burn fat for fuel, but also recover and also burn degenerative cells and just nasty tissue. I thought that was actually a good idea for me because I had the tumor, so I was like reading as much as I could about intermittent fasting. I was like reading stories of people who had undergone like long water fasts and juice fasts and stuff, which is a bit too radical for me. But they had eaten tumors, like their body would consume the tumor tissue when doing that. So I was like, okay, I'll do some intermittent fasting. These multi-day things are not for me, but I want to try the intermittent fasting because it might make me feel great as well. And what happens is your growth hormone also goes up during the fast because you're also, your adrenaline increases. And so I feel like just by taking that step, I wasn't regiment. At first, I started off like looking at lean gains. And I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing. I'm sure most people who are interested in health and fitness anyway, listening to this, like know what lean gains is. If you don't, it's a 16-8 protocol. It's a bit stricter on like the macros and stuff. But I was like trying to be really flexible because I knew I'd been really anxious about all this stuff for a long time. So I was trying to switch out of that mode and just be like, okay, long-term mindset. I'm going to take small steps one at a time. So I started the fasting, and I've literally been doing it since. Like I haven't eaten breakfast in years, and I have no desire to. Like the last thing I want to do when I wake up in the morning is eat breakfast.
Yeah, I'm actually on an intermittent fasting routine right now as well, where I just wake up and have a non-caloric, drink like coffee just to get me going, and
Yep.
water, and don't eat my meals within the window of 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. So that's my 8 hour window of caloric consumption.
Yeah, that's about the same for me. I found that like without even counting hours, I just like naturally gravitate to something like that. Like I'm hungry around 2, and then I'm have like a little snack or something before I go to bed at like 10, and then I go to bed at 12. It works. I mean, it's actually, I think it's more important for like lifestyle flexibility for most people, but it does help keep your growth hormone up for guys, and have like a period of time every day where you're really just tapping into fat for fuel, and you're giving your body a rest. You're improving your gut health because you're not always like having food in there digesting and everything. So I think it's really an important step. And while it doesn't, like intermittent fasting, at least from what I've seen in the research, it doesn't directly increase your testosterone. It actually I'm trying to search for the word. It basically it like non-scientific word, turns on things like peptides that eventually lead to increasing testosterone.
And for people listening too, it's also just a really easy way to restrict caloric consumption. So if you're trying to lose weight, like all of a sudden, if you have this like window where this is the only time I eat, just naturally because you're going to get full, it's easier. I find it like a very easy way just to lose weight as well.
Oh yeah, and it's funny too because once you get used to it, your body, when you're doing a regular fasting regimen, your body just craves good food. That was something that I found right away, and just in talking to other people, I was like, does this happen to you too? Other people, like where you're used to eating a more of a chemical laden diet, like maybe more fast food or just not high quality food. And then, but I found that like when I was fasting regularly, I was just in that period of time, I was like, God damn, if I'm going to eat this, I'm going to have like, good meal, good hearty meal, like some good meat, good eggs, maybe some vegetables, but mostly I just like starch and meat.
Let's talk a little
That's
bit about a diet optimized for testosterone in terms of the actual contents, because a lot of that, I mean, just a lot of this information is different than what we're traditionally told. And is especially relevant for people that aren't as familiar with, the benefits of cholesterol and the whole paleo movement.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so well, first off, with cholesterol, it's a really complicated thing, but it's essentially uh, the precursor for every steroid hormone in your body. So being scared of cholesterol, I think, is it's kind of dumb. It's really dumb. It's probably responsible for a lot of people's health problems if they don't have enough, cholesterol in their body. And dietary cholesterol doesn't necessarily directly translate into, endogenous cholesterol. But eating a diet that has plenty of cholesterol-rich foods from good sources like high-quality meat is a great thing for your endocrine system.
So example would be like grass-fed beef.
Yeah, grass-fed beef, eggs, cheeses, dairy. So that's really, I guess, the take on cholesterol. And I guess I was reading into like why cholesterol got such a bad rap, and it seems like it's more. It was more as like it kind of shows up on the scene of the artery clogging thing, to at least from what I read, at least to kind of help out the cause. But then what they saw is like, oh, there's all this cholesterol here, when the issue was really being caused by something else, which I don't remember exactly what I was reading about that, but that's kind of not on the topic.
So,
But
classic like correlation, not causation.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, you're at the crime scene. You must have done it. You must have committed the crime. But yeah, so I think in terms of the dietary stuff, one of the biggest realizations for me was, okay, let's do 2 steps diet. So that most people need to take. So the first step that people need to take is, and this applies to that last post you wrote on Gorilla Butter, and in doubling your testosterone. And this was something, you know, that you saw was basically if you're having low testosterone problems, for a lot of guys that can be addressed extremely simply if you have, you know, deficiency in certain things like selenium, zinc, vitamin D, B vitamins, so iron. So by getting those, I think it's beneficial to get a blood test for a lot of people if they're having low T issues, because it'll tell you a lot and measure those things. You know, if you can tell that you're deficient in certain things, just raising them back up to a normal level will get your testosterone back up to a normal level rather quickly. So that's why I liked your idea of the gorilla butter, because I was like, okay, this is a really cool idea. Just have like a easy supplement for people to take. But you know, like you were worrying about, a lot of people will like potentially overdo it because they'll think it'll like jack their testosterone way up. That's not really the point.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe we could just outline all the nutrients and trace minerals for people that are contributory towards testosterone so that people can just really understand like what they need to make sure they can research foods that make sure they're getting adequate amounts of these in their diet.
Yeah. So selenium, omega 3 is actually great too. Or some of the ratio of like get it. Let's see the fats. Basically, if you have a lower, trying to think, this one paper I read about like the
It's like
fat
a
ratios.
ratio of 2 to 1 on omega 3 versus omega 6 is healthier,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. It's yeah, something like that.
And omega
Uh,
three is the healthy fat in fish oil for those people that
yeah,
don't know that.
exactly. Like my recommendation is just to have a good quality fish oil. And I don't recommend the capsules because it's easy to denature in sunlight, for example. Denature the oil with the capsules. Plus, you're just like eating a bunch of cellulose gum in those capsules. So I recommend people just get a high quality fish oil in general. Something like Ascenta Health, they sell in most Whole Foods and health stores. They have just like you can get a good bottle of oil. And I personally know the CEO of the company, Mark, and they're like very committed to excellence in that in their sourcing and stuff. So that's one thing. Also, keeping the polyunsaturated fats low and monounsaturated fats higher. For example, like good sources of monounsaturated fats are just basic things like olives and avocados. So you know, like fatty fruits is really what those are. Um, and then I guess, well, polyunsaturated fats, stuff to avoid would be uh, over consuming a lot of nuts. Now, nuts are interesting because you'll have to like look up if, for example, like you're listening to this and you have some favorite nuts that you eat regularly. Um, I would just look up like the ratio of polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fats because like they're kind of all over the board because nuts are so high in fat. Let's see.
So what's like
Yeah,
an adequate
selenium.
dose of like, I know people like almonds, Brazil nuts, like, and they think there's this like, oh, if I eat more of these, like I'm going to get more testosterone. And actually, it seems like that actually has potentially a negative effect if you have too much.
Yeah, it's like anything. Just consuming too much of anything is going to have a negative effect. Also, specifically with nuts, is like the caloric consumption. If you're consuming a lot of them, is usually pretty high. So, to answer your question, I think it's really beneficial for people to get a blood test because it'll guide their their direct personal supplementation. I don't think having like blanket dosages is smart for people by just like going off of so and so said I need 20 milligrams of this every day. It's hard to tell unless you know what your body actually needs. So in the case of the testosterone, if you get your levels checked, for example, of like your iron levels, your selenium, zinc, B vitamins. Actually, B vitamins is like a for a lot of people in general, just for like energy and overall well-being. Get if you have like if you have some well-being issues, I highly suggest checking your B vitamin levels because a lot of people are actually genetically deficient in certain B vitamins. So that's like a really easy fix.
Do you recommend services like Inside Tracker or Wellness FX that kind of give people exact measures on their biomarkers?
Yeah, I do. I think those are pretty cool. I haven't personally subscribed to them, but I like the concept. I remember when they came out a couple years ago, I was like, or when Wellness FX came out, I was like, damn, that's a great idea. I think that I saw them in TechCrunch, and I was like, oh dang, these guys are gonna really change the way that stuff is, or the way tests are done and labs are done. So I think they're pretty cool.
Yeah, and if people aren't familiar, basically, these companies allow you to really understand like where you are from your blood mass, from your hormone measures, from a multitude of biomarkers, and then recommend like proper supplementation. So like, I knew somebody that was not able, they weren't sleeping well, and their testosterone was low, and it's because they weren't getting enough zinc in their diet, and zinc. They were able to identify that by taking this Wellness FX test and ultimately mitigate that damage that was being done and change it for the positive. So, I highly recommend like getting one of these tests done, just to kind of get a baseline of where you are and fill any gaps that might be hampering you from operating at like top performance.
Yeah, metaphorically, it's kind of like if you were trying to fix your computer. Say your computer shuts down. What they end up doing, if you bring it into like a PC shop or the Apple store, they're going to run a diagnostic test on it, and that will tell them, where the issue is. But for some reason, people, and that's like a logical way to fix something, right? Especially something as complicated as a computer. Well, humans are more complicated than computers. We have electrical and chemical complications, and yet we feel like we can just fix any issues that we have just by like reading something on the internet and like having a blanket recommendation for it without getting anything tested, without getting any real data about it. That's why I feel so strongly that people need to test their blood and their hormone levels and like vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, because it'll really tell you a lot about how to address any issues you might have. Now, if you're feeling great and healthy, then there's probably not a reason to, other than just like checking up on yourself periodically, like maybe once a year. But if you're having issues, like I highly recommend getting some blood tests done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, outside of the minerals, and did we cover all of them? I know there was a few maybe that we didn't get a chance to talk about that people should just be wary of or mindful of, rather.
Yeah, I mentioned zinc quickly, I think, and then yeah, but magnesium is totally incredibly important. The magnesium basically is one of like the essential salts or that your nervous system is built upon. So in general, like having deficient magnesium is a big issue, as is like calcium, sodium, potassium. Um, but magnesium specifically for like hormonal health is, pretty important.
So maybe we can kind of revert a little bit back to your journey, because it sounds like you started with diet, you started adopting the important trace minerals and nutrients into the diet. What happened to your testosterone?
I started feeling better. I remember and I wasn't even really focusing on that much on training at this point, other than like getting some walking in and light calisthenics. But yeah, I felt like my libido jumped up back out of nowhere. It was pretty awesome, actually. And this wasn't that long into it. I mean, it wasn't a quick road, but it was probably like 3 to 6 months into making these changes consistently. And I think an important part was having like lower psychological stress. So I
Mm.
was just not stressing that much about stuff, because obviously like stress as well is, has a response in your body, a cortisol response, which, almost, well, it's not like linear, antithetical reaction, but it basically, it works against your testosterone. So, your cortisol goes up, your testosterone is going to go down. It's not that simple, but that's what people need to understand. So keeping your stress lower is going to help, especially like if you have low testosterone problems, and you have a lot of stress in your life, then you might need to highly consider getting some of that out of there, whether it's physical or psychological. And I think that, and again, like physical wise, that's a reason why a lot of endurance athletes and overtrained athletes in general have testosterone issues and need to take supplementation, because have too much physical stress going on in their life, maybe not psychological, but physical. And then a lot of people who, work the 9 to 5 or the 9 to 9, maybe in New York or whatever. And just, it's like a lot of noise, a lot of polluted air. And it's like you're always working, you're always on edge. They have a lot of hormonal issues as well because of the psychological stress.
What are some ways that you help tell people who are dealing with psychological stress to maybe like mitigate that?
Yeah, the first is like determining where it's coming from. So, again, it's hard to like help anything without knowing exactly what's causing it. And sometimes that's not an easy thing because like a lot of times it's a really contextual thing where there's like 20 different elements of your life that are hurting you or like making you really stressed out. But for a lot of people who lead, relatively simple lives, who are worried like about, say you're not like an executive you're not a CEO or something, but you're just like have a normal life, but you're worried a lot about your health, for example. And that's I think where a lot of people are coming from, at least from what I've been teaching. Like I find that people have a lot of psychological stress about their health. I think a lot of that stems out of impatience and like information overload. So you can go online and read a billion different things to like teach you how to lose weight, lose fat. But I think finding to keep your stress low, if you're the kind of person who gets stressed out about the fact that like there are a million forums, there are a million different sources of information, I recommend you find one that you trust that's based in, actual research, but also is not too dogmatic, but it's more like, self experimentation. And there's some good resources out there for that sort of thing. And I recommend finding one or, a couple sources that you trust and then just sticking to those. Don't go reading 10 different blog posts a day on all this stuff and whatever, but like stripping away unnecessary, making things simple, I guess is a better principle to talk about. But there's that. And then the long-term mindset where you're being patient about your progress generally tends to strip away that psychological stress, because the impatience is what stresses people out, because like I need to have this happen in 8 weeks. So that can help.
I can certainly empathize with that. I think another thing too that you recommend that's really good, which I kind of started integrating, is just walking, like taking a late night walk. If you live in a place where that's not a terrible idea, just to kind of decompress your mind before you go to sleep, it's been super helpful. And I really, really have actually enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. Well, especially now you're in San Diego. It's a great place to walk around at night.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about neuromuscular training, because I think a lot of people out there, they just assume that like any old workout's going to be the same and do the same for your hormone levels. But as you've found, and as some of the other people I've talked to found, that's actually not the case.
Yeah, it's not the case. You can go dig into PubMed and find a case for increasing testosterone on like a ton of different types of exercise, because it's usually like a body's response, like acute response to exercise in general, especially in untrained individuals or like lower trained individuals, because their nervous system isn't adapted to the stressor, to the action of training. So you'll go find, and a lot of people just cherry pick studies and they're like, oh yeah, it says that running increases your testosterone. And then you look at the study and yeah, it did. Like going for a run for the subjects, the untrained subjects, increased their testosterone acutely. And then, maybe it was decreased later over time when it gets more chronic. But what I found was, when I was thinking about like the proper way to train, I was like, okay, well, if the issues are hormonal issues, endocrine issues, then training, it makes sense logically to look at like how the muscles interact with the nervous system and, your endocrine system subsequently. So that's what led me to like looking deeper into a style of training called neuromuscular training, which again is like pretty logically named, but it's focusing on training the the connections between your muscles and your nervous system to elicit the best hormonal response. So this is what it entails is like activating a lot of muscle tissue at once. So this led to like, compound movements are great. Now, a lot of people, this will seem familiar. It's like if you're used to training with like heavy lifting, lower reps, compound movements, being very explosive. So I don't remember the exact formula, but I remember, I know in my book, I like did all the calculations of just like some simple physics of work done. Because I was in all the reading, I started on neuromuscular training, I started to figure out that, okay, so it's like this, the physical work principle applies to hormonal output as well. So one study found that like the workload in training was directly correlated to the like how much of a hormonal response was elicited from the subjects. So that led me to, I started getting really into calisthenics, like street workout style stuff. And anybody who does street workout or even CrossFit, the muscle up is like the coolest thing. It's like, yeah, I can get the muscle up. So I was doing a lot of muscle ups, and then I ended up noticing it was like from the point that I started doing the muscle ups, my testosterone just like went through the ceiling. And I figured out why with this work principle, and I was just like, and this, like the point, it basically doubled. It went from like 600 something to just under 1200 in that period of time. It was like period of six to 8 months.
All other variables remaining the same, like diet, just consistent exercise, psychological stuff.
Yeah. It was basically like the only thing that I'd changed at that point. I felt like my diet was pretty consistent. I was being pretty balanced and flexible with it. And that's something I do want to talk about today as well, is like the basic macronutrient principles to operate under. But yeah, everything was pretty much the same. Obviously, like I wasn't like tightly controlling my life, so I couldn't exactly know. But the one big variable that changed was I just started doing a ton of street workout. I was living in New York City. I was close to Tompkins Square Park, which is like a famous street workout place. So all these YouTube stars were always there, like doing crazy stuff. So it really inspired me. You know those guys.
Yeah, of course. They're like shredded, and they're making the jungle gym look like an Olympic, Olympic rings in terms of what they can do on them.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing all sorts of stuff. So that really inspired me. And over that period of time, I was just like, I was doing it a lot, and not too much, but enough. That's the good thing about that style of training, is it's generally pretty limiting, self-limiting. It's like you can only do so much because your muscles are actually just like, I can't do another pull-up. I can't do another muscle up.
And for those people that aren't familiar with what a muscle up is, it's basically an explosive pull-up in where your body actually goes above the bar. You roll over your grip and then go straight into a dip above the bar. So it's like really fast pull-up, all the way exploding all the way up into a dip where you're actually like, using your triceps and other muscles to lift yourself above the bar.
Yep. And so yeah, that was when my testosterone just shot through the ceiling, when I was focusing on just doing that a lot and working on really challenging neuromuscular movements of like doing holds, planks, levers, that's why I think for people starting out, especially if you're like untrained or are getting into training, doing like street workout style stuff can be incredible, because you don't even need that long of a workout, but it's really going to train your neuromuscular connections, because it works your muscles so deep. It's kind of strange, but it's like you can go and do a 15-minute workout when you're just starting it, and you're done for like 2 days. Like you can't do any more if you challenge yourself enough.
I think that there's a lot of people who are probably listening to this. Maybe they're more adept in fitness, who are just like, well, yeah, but I want to have the beach body. I want to be buff. I want to be big. And that requires me going and, doing the bench press, doing deadlifts, doing these big weights, big heavy weights. Is that a myth that you can't have that body by doing things like calisthenics, where you're literally just doing all body weight stuff?
Oh yeah, definitely a myth. I mean, I would just tell people who think that way, just like go check out YouTube, check out like Bar Brothers, Barbarians, Bar Stars, like all those dudes. They are just out on the bars a lot and freaking huge. Like they're bigger than and subsequently way stronger than most weightlifters. Because a lot of time, and I'm not against weightlifting. I go to the gym a couple times a week and lift and work on like progressive strength gain and lifting. But a lot of people don't focus on progressive strength gain and lifting, and they don't actually get that strong. You know, they'll go for years and do the same movements at the same general.
Dude, that's my dad. He's been benching like the same weight in our basement for like 12 years. I'm like, Dad, come on.
Yeah, well, it's that's where the problem comes from with people that were like, yeah, I lift all the time, but I don't see much progress. Physique wise, it's like that's because I think like the general principle is to focus on, okay, physique wise, what do you want to have happen? Okay, I want bigger shoulders. So do you think deadlifting all the time is going to get you bigger shoulders if you already have like good sized legs? Probably not. So go focus on building strength in your shoulder press or your overhead press. That's like a good way to go about things, but that's another topic too. Like we talk about all this stuff.
Yeah. And I think, there's a couple things that interest me about neuromuscular training. And a lot of people, they want to increase their reps and stuff on like an isolated movement, like bench press. And what a lot of people don't do is change or train the like ancillary muscles required to improve the bench, like their ability of their shoulders to even support lifting that much weight. And they can't figure out why their bench won't go up. And
Yeah.
I really like the neuromuscular training where you're like activating as many muscles as possible, because it does just make you stronger, because the way that our body's able to push weight, it just requires a lot of different muscles for each movement. And sometimes certain muscles go untrained.
Yeah, well, in the calisthenics, the street workout, when you get into more complicated movements or like trying new tricks and stuff, because it's also there's an element of play to it. Like it's really fun. You're just out on the jungle gym or whatever, just messing around. But when you get into that point, you're like, I didn't even know that muscle existed. Like, where the heck? I'm so sore in some random ass place. It's like, where did that come from? But that, it's like what you just said. It just activates so many different muscles that you're really building this core strength like deep in your muscle tissue. Now the way it can be difficult for people doing pure street workout sometimes to like get big. Say it's like a skinnier guy and he's trying to get jacked. That can be difficult if you don't approach it in the right way. So a lot of people will go and they'll think, okay, street workout. I'm just gonna try and do 40 pull-ups, and work your way up to that. And like I that was me first. I was like, okay, more is better. So I did 40 pull-ups, and I worked my way up to it. And I was like, okay, well that didn't really do much. It's like now I'm just good at doing a lot of pull-ups. It's just like a thing. Just trained myself to do a lot of pull-ups, which didn't really apply to anything. So I started focusing I shifted. I was like, I'm going to do weighted pull-ups and see how much I can lift weight-wise. Like have a dip belt with plates on it. But that was like a real turning point in terms of like physique development with the calisthenics, because that was when, especially weighted chin-ups, when you have your palms facing you.
Yep.
Man, like arm growth, shoulder, and then my back just turned into freaking steel off of that. And so that was where I was like, damn, this is awesome. So I wrote a bit about that on my blog, and a bunch of people started jumping on that and, sending me messages weeks later, and they're like, damn, this is amazing. Like, this is actually what I needed to spur the growth that I wanted in my back. So that's pretty cool. And then also doing like weighted muscle ups is a good thing. Like a lot of people, when you get the muscle up the first time and you get so excited about it, and then you quickly build up to like 3-5 of them. And then some people can just build up, like the most I've done was like 15. And at that point still, I was actually a fashion model in New York, and I was pretty slim. I was like 6'4", 185. So I could still do all this stuff, but it was the same syndrome as the pull-up syndrome. It was like, yeah, it's not really adding any muscle, but like the muscle I have is getting very, very dense. But then I started doing weighted And the weighted ones, it's like crazy how much power you can develop just having like starting out with a, you know, a 10-pound weight between your feet, and then like 25, then 40. And then it gets a bit more difficult because it's like hard to hold that between your feet. But the amount of raw power you start to develop is really awesome. And with that progressive strength development, that's where you start seeing the, you know, like your chest starts coming in really nicely, and you know, your shoulders are looking really good off of that. So that's something that we actually talk about on my fitness podcast. Greg O'Gallagher of Kino Body and I have that show, and it's Road to Ripped. And the progressive strength gain principle is the one that we always tout as like the best way to build your physique for people who want to do that. And it doesn't, I don't think it matters whether you're doing calisthenics or weight training. I think that's just a good principle to operate on. So with calisthenics, it's like, okay, you know, you're training, doing some good neuromuscular training, some explosive calisthenics movements. Instead of just doing normal pull-ups, you're doing like explosive pull-ups, clap pull-ups, that sort of thing. At a certain point, you want to progressively develop your strength. Like maybe it becomes easy at around the 5 rep point. And that's another element of the neuromuscular training is like rep numbers. Keeping your reps right in the 4 to 6 range is generally the best for that style of training, because if you can go over that many reps, you're not doing enough work. You remember I had the work principle earlier.
One question I have from you, when you went from like a 600 testosterone to close to 1200, what physiological and mental changes did you incur? Because I know that like certain things like libido, like there's like a threshold, which like after a certain point, you don't really get that many increases in terms of like your desire for whatever your preference is sexually. But what are some things that happened for that like increase in number?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because this is a huge misconception with everyone. They think like, okay, so 600 is actually, that's a good level, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a good healthy level of testosterone. Most people most guys at 600, they'll basically, you know, their libido will be great, their well-being will be good, they'll be, you know, recovering from their workouts well, sleeping well. But yeah, when I made that jump, I honestly didn't notice a whole lot other than in that realm. Like my libido was completely fine and didn't feel much different. So there is definitely the threshold just from anecdotal experience, and then obviously they've found it in research. But I think the biggest benefit from it was, or there are a couple of things. There was one, it was like well-being and just the confidence of knowing it's like, damn, you know, my testosterone was high. I don't know, there's something about that.
I feel like the man.
I'm the man, yeah. Also, another thing is I think women, it's strange, like the pheromone hypothesis. Like women can smell it. It's strange because it I don't know, you just get a lot more, especially after like a workout or something. I just feel like it was very easy to get a lot of attention from women. And then it was really interesting because here's a little story. My dad, so I was trying to help him out with his testosterone because, you know, he's like in his 50s and it's on the natural decline. But there are some things that he could be doing to increase it without it declining too fast. And so I was helping him out, and like he started off on hormone replacement, so he had the T gels and stuff. And it was funny because my mom and my sister, they were like, he could be out in the garage and they'd be like, is dad here? I can smell him. And they were just like going crazy over this gel. Like they love this gel, the smell of the T gel. But for men, like there's like a subtle smell, but you can't really tell. So that made me interested, and I was like, oh, there's something to this whole pheromone thing. But that was another benefit. I just felt like I got a lot more attention from women. Whether it was pheromones or not, or maybe it was like the increased confidence, I don't know. And then also like training wise, I think was probably the coolest benefit because my body before, with the low testosterone problems, I was having trouble like recovering. I'd be really sore. I wouldn't sleep very well. I had a lot of insomnia issues actually. But then, I started sleeping like a bear, like a freaking rock. I'd just pass out, wake up, super sound sleep. I could train really hard, my body was responding really well to like proportion wise, like, okay, I'm training my shoulders a lot. I see increases in not only strength, but like physical, tangible, sight. It just looks better. Like my measurements are going up, getting better, pretty quickly. So that was a really good benefit. And I think it's more of like the icing on the cake. When you get up above like 600-700 for a guy, it's not going to radically change your life, but it's just like some good stuff.
Yeah, totally. And listen, I'm totally in your camp. Like there is some mental paradigm where it's, the mind leads the body leads the mind. Like if you know that you are like top 5% in some measure that for whatever reason our society has connotated with masculinity, you just carry yourself differently. You feel awesome if you feel like the man. And I know that like once, so just a quick background, everybody. I did have some nutrient deficiencies and was on the lower side of the testosterone scale, and have naturally doubled mine and am above 600 now. And yeah, man, I just feel like a beast like when I walk around. And I don't know if that's all mental, but I don't really care because what I want is the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. It's your perception is your reality. So, you're feeling great, and you're feeling confident. So you are, that's what you are right now. So it's awesome.
Yeah, man. So I know that you mentioned you want to talk a little bit about the macro stuff. Maybe we
Yeah, I
could
just want to make sure we
land this
didn't
plane
miss
with
it.
that.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, this is actually like a really important topic for people because it's huge misunderstanding. So, a lot of people, especially coming from like a paleo background, they get it right with the fats. So like increase the amount of healthy fats in your diet. And we talked a little bit about it earlier. Um, having some great monounsaturated fat sources in your diet is great, and that's where people with like a paleo eating schedule or like regimen, that's great. That's where they get it right. But what happens a lot of times, and it's been just not even just paleo, but just the craze over the last decade is just the low carb thing, and that's where I think people run into a ton of issues. I have had countless people email me, and a lot of them turned into clients where they're like, I need help. I've been low carb and for the last year, and it's just I'm still like not losing fat. I'm still having testosterone issues, and I thought this was all going to be solved because all the research says like adding all these fats in and having like good source of protein is what you need to increase your testosterone. And what I tell them, I'm like, okay, we'll do a little experiment for 2 weeks. Have do a fast, have your first meal around lunchtime, do a basic low carb meal, like paleo style meal that you've been eating. Get some good fats in there from an avocado or something. And then for your evening meal, say you train in the late afternoon, for your evening meal, have some starch from either a normal or sweet potato or some white rice, just some basic starch in your diet, whether it's like maybe 2 potatoes with some meat. And within a couple of weeks, a lot of these guys, they solve their sleeping problems. Boom. And they're like, damn, dude. And also it's like my libido just shot up out of nowhere. Like now I'm actually interested in sex again. It's like, yeah, it's pretty damn simple. It's also very predictable for a lot of people who like are intentionally keeping their carbs extremely low. And it's funny because even on a lot of the paleo recommendations that I've seen, it's like, keep your carbs like around 150 grams of carbs a day, which that's actually not that bad. It's like you're still eating a decent amount of carbs, but a lot of people they'll take a recommendation like that and then they'll go down to like 50. They'll be like, if I go way lower, then I'll lose more fat.
Right.
But then they run into the sleeping issues. They run into anxiety problems. They have libido problems. So macronutrient wise, I think, well, another thing, so that's people coming from like paleo perspective. Now people coming from more of a bodybuilding background have another problem. They usually have the problem of focusing too much on protein because, for the last decade, again, everything that you read on a lot of these bodybuilding sites, and I think they're becoming a bit better with education on this, but for the most part, it's been focused on protein. It's like protein is the manliest
Right.
macronutrient. You know, the more protein you eat, the more muscle you're going to gain.
Protein.
Yeah, the protein thing. Well, it's a great way to push protein supplements, that's for sure. But you know, it gets people like super scared. You know, if I don't eat my 200 grams of protein every day, I'm gonna lose my muscle that I work so hard for, and then you know they get frozen into this mentality of like I can't eat anything but protein and like a little bit of carbs and like a little bit of fat, and that's the traditional bodybuilding dogma that you see a lot on all the forums and stuff. And it might help you get like shredded. It really does actually if you like focus a lot on protein, but you just kill your hormones in the process. So a lot of people are coming from that aspect, and they think protein is like this be all end all, you know, power macronutrient thing. The problem is it's the least important out of the three macronutrients: fats, carbs, and protein. It's the least important for your testosterone. So if you're focusing on increasing your carbs and your fats, you're actually going to have a lot higher testosterone. Now, it doesn't mean that you know you're going to be super ripped and have high testosterone, because that's actually not an easy thing to do. It takes a long time to get to that point, like long, slow, steady fat loss with these principles in place to get under like 10% body fat, but still have high testosterone. Because like the lower body fat you get at a certain point, your hormones take a hit for it because you're usually in like a big calorie deficit. But protein is like I'm trying to think of the exact. There was like a protein to fat. I should remember this. I just did a video on it. My memory is like going all over the place lately. But basically, like the protein to carbohydrate ratio, I think it was the higher it was, meaning like the higher protein versus carbohydrates in this study, the lower testosterone was. And then, you know, the inverse is true. Is like when they increased the carb intake on these subjects, their testosterone also went up. And this was I think they had like control levels of fat consumption, like basic fat consumption, but they were just, you know, flip-flopping the protein and carbs around. And these were in, you know, individuals that were training. So this is still applicable to most people, because that's another thing to look at with these studies is like sometimes they do studies in people who are completely untrained and not training. So it helps to put them in the same context that you would be in your life if you're trying to figure this out. Yeah, it's like, okay, if you go to the gym 3 times a week, 4 times a week, then you're training. So you want to look at studies that show like results with people who are training. So, you know, and protein is still important for, you know, muscle maintenance and muscle growth. So the trick with people with like your macronutrients is to have like a baseline level of protein that you kind of, I recommend that people self-experiment here. I'm really a big proponent of self-experimenting, and what works for some people might not be the best for others. So hit a baseline level of protein that allows you to recover well from your training, because again, a lot of people's training is completely different, like the amount and whatnot. Recover from your training, feel like you're really supporting yourself with that, and then fill in the rest with the carbs and the fats. And this might not mean eating 200 grams of protein, and it almost definitely doesn't mean eating that much protein or more. Some people go up to like 300, and it's like, you know, all they eat is chicken breast. So, you know, it's like a basic principle of a balanced principle. And people always want, you know, macro percentages, like what's the ideal breakdown. Again, I think it's a very individual thing, but in general, it's just a straight up balance. It's like, and I don't know if I want to even verbalize this, but I think the zone diet has like a pretty good, just for pure like percentages, it's pretty rational way to go about it.
What does the zone diet preach?
They have like 30, 30, 40.
30 protein, 30 fats, 40 carbs.
Actually, I don't know what their 40 was. I thought the 40 was protein, I think. But for like a training individual, like athlete, I think it was zone diet for athletes where I saw that. And that's pretty great balance, though. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's a great place for people to start if they're going to go on the self-experimenting thing. Start around that kind of a split where you have a good amount of fat, you got a good amount of carbs, and you have a good amount of protein if you're training. Having your protein higher like that, like at a 40. And then from there, like run that for, 4 to 6 weeks and be diligent about keeping it right around that point. so you can really measure, with this experiment. So if you improve, maybe you're coming off of a low carb thing for the last year, and you go on to something like that, I almost guaranteed you will feel much better. But from there, then you can tweak it slightly. So you can be like, okay, I still feel like I'm eating too much protein. I'm just gonna, maybe I'm craving more carbs, so I'm just gonna subtract some of this protein and then get it back with carbs and keep my calories the same, and then run that for another 4 weeks, see how it feels. I think if people were to iterate like that, and it's kind of like software development, it's like doing these little sprints. Eventually they're going to come upon like what's really going to work for them and make them feel amazing. But really it is a balance. That's what I always tell people to try and achieve, is a balance between the 3 macronutrients. They're not meant to be severely, strictly like limited, because, your body really needs all of them. And for carb-wise, I think just simple starches are the way to go. They're tasty.
Right. And if somebody's like trying to lose weight while still taking this account, something you can do is Carb Cycle, right?
Yep. Carb cycling is it's a bit more advanced way to do it. I think as long as they're as long as the person is like emotionally mature, doing something like carb cycling is good for a short period of time. And that'd be where you maybe, for example, like carb cycling example, it's like you're keeping your protein at a similar level every day, but on one day you're having a bunch of fat, the rest of it is fat, and then the other day you have very little fat and then a lot of carbs, and that's kind of like a carb cycling thing. And it doesn't have to be every other day. There are a lot of variations of it, but that's, I used to do that when I was modeling, like before shoots, and I would get ripped up. But the hard thing is like it's hard to sustain for a long period of time. It's definitely not like a lifestyle thing.
Right. For me, I'm currently in a carb cycle because honestly, I've been traveling for like 6 weeks. I put on some bad weight. I was just being sloppy, and it's just like go shooting for like the zone macronutrient balance that you said on training days, and then on days that don't train, having more of a balance of just protein and fats.
Yeah, that's a good way to go about it. That's pretty similar to the lean gains thing too that he does, Martin, where it's like on your off days your carbs are a lot lower, and then on your training days you have your carbs to support anabolic growth. Definitely can work. I think the biggest thing with just losing body fat in general is especially if you're trying to keep your hormone balance while losing body fat, keep your macronutrients nice and balanced, but then just have your calorie deficit in about like a 20% deficit, from off of like your maintenance. And over time, like you'll keep your hormones healthy while dropping body fat. Now, will it be as fast as, say going into a big deficit? Say your maintenance is at like 2,500 calories, and then say you start eating at 1,800 calories for 6 weeks, you'll probably lose a lot more fat doing that, but you'll also take a hit. You'll also have like sleeping problems, libido issues, that sort of thing. You'll get really hungry, cranky, anxious. So the calories, just like a low, a small calorie deficit over time is really what I recommend. Is like, if you want to stay hormonally healthy, you're not in a rush, you have a long-term mindset, and then you're keeping your macros balanced, you'll still feel great while you're doing it. And then that's like awesome because it's the sweet spot. You eventually find that sweet spot and you're just there, and you're every week you're looking better, feeling better. And soon weeks turn into months, turn into like a full year, and you just look amazing,
Slow and steady, baby.
Yep.
Chris, this has been awesome, man. I think there's just so much good information here, and just spreading the awareness around our hormonal health, because it just doesn't get talked about a lot. And people, like you said, just continue to try different diets, continue to try different workouts, and don't really ever think about their hormones. They think about, their macros in terms of protein, carbs, and fats. So this has been awesome, man. For people that want to learn more about this, get deeper into the testosterone optimization rat hole, which I've spent plenty of time in, where's the best place they can go, man?
Yeah, well, I have a program. It's Testosterone.io, and that's testosterone.io. That's the domain. And then also my personal blog is chriswalk.com, CHRISWALK.com. And over there I like blog about testosterone stuff and smart drug stuff too.
And I highly recommend that testosterone.io resource, as well as Chris's blog. I've spent some time there, and it's really good because it's all backed by science, which is refreshing with amongst all the noise in the fitness and nutritional optimization world out there.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not even going to deal with all that nonsense, and just I'll like give people a natural resource. It's like education is such an amazing resource, because then you can do it yourself, and eventually like save so much money too when you know what to do. It's really beneficial.
Love it, man. Chris, thanks again for coming on, dude. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to future conversations, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. If you haven't done that already, right now is the best time to take care of that and get on board. And while you're there, if you feel like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us an iTunes review so that more people can find the show. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes and links mentioned from this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. Alrighty, let's go ahead and dive into today's Mindshare. Alrighty, well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Chris. Super interesting and smart guy. Somebody I definitely recommend following and checking out. And he also has a really cool band called Mess out of LA too that you guys might enjoy. Anyways, today I just wanted to talk about a topic and kind of stress on something that I think is really important for people, especially when it comes to health. So my quick background on testosterone, if you didn't get a chance to check it out on my blog, basically, I figured that I was totally fine hormonally, and right before I left and moved to Brazil, I got my T tested and I was at 270. Now, 270 is not like, the world is over, oh my God, but it's pretty low, especially for a 25-year-old dude. And I was kind of annoyed because I realized that like all the working out I was doing, all my emotions, all of these things could have been way better than they were. So I took some advice from my friend Ben Altman, and started implementing intermittent fasting. And I did intermittent fasting for 3 months. I was in the best shape of my life. I gave up drinking. I did all these things to increase that testosterone level in Brazil. And when I got back, I was so excited to get it tested. And I did, and that number was 260. I could not believe it. I thought for sure that I was going to be like way higher, and I actually decreased by doing this dieting thing. And I was doing low carbs, which we know that from Chris's interview, that's actually can cannibalize testosterone. I couldn't believe it went lower. So I started to dig more into the subject. I found all the nutrients, which were discussed in this episode, that I needed, and I started taking them. I started doing Brazil nuts. I started doing coconut oil. I started taking ZMA pills. Started taking more fish oil, vitamin D, and all of this like stack of vitamins that I just mentioned, and got off the intermittent fasting. And when I came back to the States, my testosterone levels were over 550, and then I got to test it again another month, and now I'm in over 600. And I finally got this hormone fixed. And it wasn't doing the intermittent fasting protocol that had worked by itself for so many other guys. And I think like the important thing to realize here is that your body is unique. What's going to work for you isn't going to work for everybody else. And the only way that you can figure out how to optimize your hormonal system, your nutrition with the biomarker stuff, is to get tested, is to test your blood, and then subsequently test things that have proven to work on others and see if anything changes. But if you don't get tested, if you don't get your blood work done through something like Wellness FX or Inside Tracker, and you don't like basically have a single variable that you're trying to test to determine what works best for you, it's really going to be hard for you to optimize your genetics and your hormonal functions and your bodies. So, there's so much health information out there. There's so many different methodologies. At the end of the day, like, we're all unique. We all have unique bodies that respond differently to unique things. And the only way that you're going to optimize yours is just by seeing what works for you and calibrating and being super mindful of that. So I just want to leave everybody with this thought, and I encourage you to test things on your body in a safe way and see what works best for you, because what works best for somebody else isn't always going to be the absolute best solution for your body. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for listening. If you want to learn more about my testosterone journey, you can just go to life-thelonglearner.com and you'll read a post there that talks about how I doubled it. And I encourage everybody interested in the topic to go check out Chris's site, testosterone.io and chriswalk.com. Alrighty, I will see you next time on The Competitive Edge.